So today we're going to talk a bit about creating your own platforms. And this is going to be relatively advanced. So if you're feeling a little bit behind on certain segments, that's okay. Just feel free to ask questions in the chat and we can follow up afterwards. So just starting out, since we're going to talk about chat platforms today, I'm going to ask everyone in the chat to describe, if you had to describe yourself as a platform or an app, what platform would you be and why? So think about what platform are you? And no need to overthink it, just whatever you comes to mind. Definitely no right answers or wrong answers. I'm really liking these answers already. Okay, as we let those roll in, please do update. It's going to be really important for a later exercise. No, I'm just kidding, it's not. Okay. So in case you missed it, there was a basic and intermediate hybrid pedagogy in the last couple of weeks. We're still finalizing the cheat sheet for the intermediate segment, but I did share out the basic cheat sheet. You should expect that relatively soon. Just takes a little bit of time to get all the questions answered and also to edit the videos. So watch out for those. Okay, today we're going to be covering creating your own platforms. This cat GIF got faster because it's more intense. And for the agenda today, I'll do an overview of platforms and specifically talking about affordances in software. And then we'll do a technical run through of a few workflows for creating platforms. We'll do a collaborative exercise to explore some examples of platforms. And then we'll do a breakout room exercise at the end on what platforms we would like to create. Okay, so this won't be new for folks that joined the past two, but before we get started, I just want to recognize that we're in a moment where GSAP pedagogy is being reshaped. So the methods that we use to teach, whether that's in Zoom calls or making space for quieter voices, discussing or not discussing racial inequalities, all of what we decide to do will create the culture and the norms of the school. And so in this moment of reshaping, we just can't underestimate the importance in the methods we're using, just thinking a bit more about the methods we're using to teach. And let's make this next chapter of GSAP more inclusive and more experimental environment where critical discussion is really welcomed. Okay. So today, I'm going to kick us off with talking about affordances on platforms. So what do I mean by affordance? So affordance refers to the qualities or properties of an object that define the possible uses of how it can or should be used. So if you think about a teapot, the handle makes you want to grab it at the handle. You can pour it out the spout because it's got a hole. A button can be pushed but not so easily turned, maybe. And so an affordance has to do with, I like to think about it as the verb to the noun. So like, what are the capabilities or the behavior of a thing based on its kind of properties. And likewise, we see those properties in physical environments. So whether that's based on the spatial layout of a building or a house that impacts who you might talk to or where someone goes. In a lecture hall, having a podium at the front of the class means you're talking at a big group of people. In a courtroom setting, just the position of seats might change who has power to speak and authority to speak. Likewise, sitting on a ground in a circle changes the affordance of what people can do. So I'm talking about this because our platforms, be that Zoom, email, or Google Slides, or Miro, have affordances, and they have things that are easy to do in them or things that are not easy to do in them. A physical classroom might be better for directing info at a lot of people without any interruption, whereas a Zoom breakout room allows for more easy exchange back and forth between individuals. So as we start thinking about our own platforms and creating our own platforms, it's good to think about these affordances. So remote chatting platforms like Zoom might be good at screen sharing, but they don't represent spatiality in any way. And they don't allow for that same informal roaming the way you might roam around and talk to people in person when you're in studio. Likewise, a formal course website like Courseworks might be good at disseminating really structured information to a class, but they don't easily allow for those more informal conversations or nonlinear exploration of material. So since we're going to be talking about creating our own custom platforms, I guess it's good to qualify what I mean by a custom platform. I'm using it super loosely, but I really mean like a website or an application that is built to have a specific functionality or like a specific use. So a course website with student projects that is public, or a course website for tutorials that's non-linear, or a chat application that allows participants to share a geolocation. Basically, I just mean a website or an app that's not super commercial. Okay, so maybe you've been thinking, I should build a website for my course. Should you? So some reasons you might is the functionality doesn't currently exist with other tools that you're using like Miro or Zoom. Maybe it's to allow students to better access and share work. Another reason is to share the content more publicly. So there's a lot of GSAP professors that have course websites intended at reaching a broader audience. And it also helps not having to recreate certain material for the coming semesters. And then you also might have or be thinking about structuring your students' projects around creating platforms. So maybe you want to develop something that's students will create platforms that are methods of collaboration with drawing tools. So maybe the format of the class material itself could be about creating platforms. Okay, but maybe you feel uncomfortable with programming. That's totally okay. So I just wanted to get a sense of where people, what level of comfort people have with creating their own platform. You don't necessarily have to code. So are folks seeing a poll right now? Great. So just answering this poll, you can answer multiple. What your level of comfort is. And we'll cover multiple levels, so don't worry too much. All right, I'll just give a few more seconds for those who haven't answered yet. Great. So looks like somewhat balanced. A lot of people that have made some of their own websites from Squarespace, some from WordPress, and then a few that are comfortable with coding or building their own websites or apps. Okie dokie. So some things you might consider when deciding to create a platform. You don't have to build everything from scratch. So there are a lot of websites like Medium and Bubble.io, which I'll go over, that don't require any programming, but allow you to create apps or websites. You might also think about pooling together with other studios or courses so that it's not just one person having to build out a platform. There might be opportunities to involve the TAs more heavily or work together with other courses. And then I would just say that in spring 2020, there was some mixed feedback on building custom websites. And so I think it's really useful in many regards because it allows you to really curate the format, but it also can take a lot of effort. So just think about what level of what you're really looking to get out of it, and how much do you need to do custom versus is there opportunities to do segments that are custom and use things off the shelf. Okay. So I'll go through a few workflows for creating platforms, and I'll share out again in the cheat sheet the links for the kind of step-by-step guidance for going through these workflows. Each one of these workflows would probably be an hour workshop in and of itself, so we'll just try and capture what we can. Okay, so if you answered in more of the easy category on comfort level, don't worry. You can create a Medium publication. This is something that I like to do because it's a lot of off-the-shelf functionality. Daniil Nagy at GSAP also does this. I actually stole the technique from him. So Medium is like a blogging platform somewhat similar to WordPress, but you can create full publications. So it's already set up. It's an easy way for students to get started without having to do much. You get a dedicated homepage. So it basically looks like a full website. You can host tutorials. Students can also submit work to it. So they can submit their projects to it. But it does require accepting the written submissions from students. So it takes a bit more work on that end. So editors, basically the instructors, can review and edit and curate what the Medium website ends up looking like. So you'll notice the website on the top, the data mining website versus the generative design website, both they have similarities. We're both using that tile format, but they have different formats. And you'll notice the top navigation bar is different. So there's a lot of customization that can happen. And then students can contribute and publish things to different pages within that Medium publication. So you'll need to create a Medium account, create your Medium publication, customize the publication, and then add editors and writers. Basically, your TA might be an editor and your writers would be students, and then have students submit to the publication. So this will be shared, and we'll have, there's like a full tutorial on how to go through these. Okay. Intermediate So if you're feeling intermediate or somewhat ready to dive into building your own platform, you might consider something like bubble.io. So bubble.io allows you to build software applications without any programming. So it's akin to, let's start with like Squarespace, kind of what everyone knows. But Squarespace has very limited functionality. It's just a website. It doesn't allow you to choose where a map goes or where a search bar goes. You basically just pick a template. This allows you to pick the sizes of things, decide how many web elements you want on a site. It also has customizable workflow functionality similar to something like if this then that, where I can say, actually this will be simpler to explain on this this next page. So you can decide what elements you want on a page, a search box or a map. You can size those elements and tie them together. So I can designate the search box as looking for addresses or only a text field. And then when the address is entered and searched for, I can make sure that is populated on the map. So that kind of interconnection and programmable logic is not available on something like Squarespace. And then on this image you see on the right that says workflow, that is where you can customize tying the elements together. So I can say, if this button is clicked, then sign the user up, send their data to the database and log it in this format. So gives you a ton of functionality that usually you would require a software engineer, but they have a very well-guided in-app tutorial as you go through this. You don't need any programming knowledge to use it. It's pretty cool. Okay. So it also works with a lot of plugins. So if folks are familiar with things like Airtable, basically it's a database. It's basically a spreadsheet, but more like a database where you can store information and tie attributes to specific data. And so you can use things like Airtable to have students submit their projects. They can submit images or videos. They can submit text with those images and videos, and they can populate basically what's very akin to a spreadsheet. And working with the plugins for Bubble, then you can populate those images on web pages that you develop. And so you can structure, when those images appear and how often and what size and that kind of thing. It costs about double what a Squarespace subscription does, but it also offers a lot more functionality. And I just don't be frightened by the way it looks on first appearance. This image on the right is not bubble.io. Actually, if you go to the bubble.io website, you might be struck by how commercial many of the websites look. Just know that it's used in many commercial formats, but you can use it in a really poetic and creative way. Something like window swap, where you're moving through video environments out different windows across the world. That could easily be created in bubble.io. So there's a lot of functionality in there, but hasn't yet been extensively used by the artist community. Okay, last one, and then we'll move into a workshop. So if you are in the category of feeling okay to program and not intimidated by writing your own applications, then maybe this workflow is right for you. You might do this if you're really comfortable with programming and you're also trying to get a bit more control that you couldn't find on something like Bubble. So this was a workflow and the website on the right that was created with this workflow. It was shared to me by Andrew Human and Dante Young, who built it for ADR2. And so the list on the left that you're seeing there inside that website are student names, and the threads are the projects that those students worked on or the people that they collaborated with. And then the thumbnail images bring you to the actual project. So if you click on those, they'll link to a video, GIF, or image, or something along those lines that they created for the project. So highly customized, but definitely requires more. So I won't go through all of this, but just to give you a high-level view of what creating something like that takes. This was created with Vue.js, so an open source JavaScript framework for building user interfaces. It's similar to Angular or React, if you're familiar with that. And then that backend is created by Airtable. This is the thing I was referencing before, basically like a spreadsheet, but it's a database. And that's where students submitted their work. So it was very easy to just give them a link and they could upload their work there. And then we could populate it on the website. And then Netlify is another useful thing at the end. When you have your website all packaged up, you basically upload a zip file to Netlify, which hosts the domain. Something similar to if you're familiar with Amazon Web Services, that's where you would usually host something like a website. Okay, I assume people either have questions or totally tuned out at the end when things got crazy. All right. So I was hoping we could do an exercise together where I'll put on some music and all together we're going to explore some examples. So somewhat akin to what we did the last time we were together. And I'll be sharing a Google Slides link so you can explore these slides. I'm just going to go through the format of the following slides. So these are the slides we're going to go through together. But before we do that, let me just describe the structure of the slide. So at the very top, you will see the site link. So the following slides have examples of platforms. A lot of them are course platforms or websites. And then there's some other websites that are sprinkled in or apps sprinkled in that I think are just to provoke conversation. So what I want to do during this time is just click that site URL on any of the following slides and just poke around and get a vibe for how that information is structured, really thinking about the affordances of what that allows, so that when we come back together, we can have a more structured conversation about the affordances of those sites, and more specifically, like what is missing in spatial design, in spatial critics. What types of applications or functionality do you need in your courses that doesn't yet exist in the platforms that you're most used to working with? So another other format thing, I've added some badges of like unique affordances of some of these sites, but it's in no way all-encompassing or extensive. Okay, so let me copy this link and I'll share it. Oh, and Daniel also let me know that we sent out the intermediate. So let me know if you didn't receive that, the intermediate hybrid pedagogy from last week.